Hello users, and welcome to another episodic installation of Above It All, the show where I tell you very important things happening in important places. So this happened in Atlanta, and Atlanta's been kind of, from what I understand, a little bit of a disaster area. There's been a lot of unrest, both civil and very uncivil. There's been a lot of groups kind of roaming and roving, taking advantage of a lot of the uncertainty. I also know that the police do not like the citizens of Atlanta and are refusing to respond to a lot of calls. And ultimately, this has led to a situation where, unfortunately, an 8-year-old was shot and killed. And there was a big shooting that harmed, from what I understand, at least a dozen people. And there were also other shootings in similar places at very close times. This is a problem. So I'm just going to read this article for you, and then we'll go from there. Gunfire broke out on 4th of July weekend in Atlanta, injuring over 20 people and killing 3, including an 8-year-old girl, police said. So, over 20 people were shot, 3 were killed, including a small child. Absolutely reprehensible. An investigation is underway after the 8-year-old was fatally shot Saturday night across the street from the Wendy's restaurant, where a former police officer killed Rayshard Brooks, officials said. Sakuria, I don't know how to pronounce their name, I'm sorry. Sasoria Turner was riding in a car with her mother and an adult friend on I-75/85. When they exited onto University Avenue, police spokesman Sergeant John Chafee said or told USA Today, as the driver tried to enter the parking lot at 1238 Pryor Road, a group of armed individuals blocked the entrance, Chafee said. Someone from the group began shouting at the car multiple times, striking the 8-year-old girl. Police said the girl was taken to Atlanta Medical Center where she died from her injuries. And then you can see photographs here. Terrible. I don't know what to say. There have been ongoing protests near the Wendy's restaurant in the aftermath of the death of Brooks and George Floyd, who was killed by police in Minneapolis on Memorial Day. Enough is enough, Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, who I think should be I'm not going to, said at a Sunday news conference, "You shot and killed a baby, and there wasn't just one shooter. There were at least 2 shooters," Bottoms said. "If you want to be part of a solution and not the problem, you need to clear out of the area." Police officers are offering a $10,000 reward for more information on Turner's death. After officials held the press conference, police responded to another shooting on Pryor Road, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported. Police found 2 people who appeared to have been shot and later said that a third victim who was taken to a hospital was also shot at the same location, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported. 1 victim died from their injuries, the newspaper reported. And this is a huge problem when you have a situation where there is no proper organization. You know, when you have police ignore specific sectors for an extended period of time, when you've got protesters trying to make a positive change, that creates, and then you've got a lot of right-wingers that are going in to agitate, that creates a vacuum where literally anything can happen. We saw this in the autonomous zone in Seattle. We see it in whenever there's a giant, riot, as they say. I prefer civil uprising or unrest. There are always going to be nefarious actors. This is why people want to have a This is why people want to distinguish between riots, looting, stealing, shooting, and then also protesters. Now, the problem is the media will combine those. They will combine them all. We don't know if these were protesters. We don't know what they were there for. We don't know literally anything about the people that shot this 8-year-old girl, at least not to my knowledge. If there's an update, please send me the link. I would like to follow this. But we don't know anything about that. Now, they could be protesters, and if so, they're not protesting for anything that I agree with. They could be there under different, auspices. They could be there, trying to do something else and just happen to be in that situation. But it doesn't matter, because actions speak louder than words. You cannot be a Black Lives Matter protester and then kill an 8-year-old black child. That is impossible. Those things are directly at odds with one another. Now, does that mean everyone in the situation wasn't a protester? No. But that means the people that were doing the shooting were far more concerned with something else than the protest going on nearby. And again, there's no way to know if these were affiliated with protesters, at least not right now. And obviously, this is a horrendous and horrible situation. And this is one of those things where, again, if you have a complete, system of governance that is completely without organization, this is what will happen. This is the natural decay of having everyone hate each other, everyone being scared of each other, and having no groups that are there to adjudicate between these things. This is what happens. And this is a problem all across the country. Is the police certainly aren't doing their job. The police aren't doing anything. So the central authority that people are grown up teaching, taught to respect, that central authority ain't showing out for them. They're not showing up. So that creates a vacuum where you've got these multiple different groups that are poorly organized. And then you've got these individual groups among them that are also poorly organized, creating situations that are extremely violent and extremely dangerous. And, the only way that I can think about making a better situation is by having the organizational structure. Organize outside of the state. You don't need cops. What you need is a group of like-minded individuals that are disciplined and that can transmit a message. And you need them to be on the ground in any of these contexts at any time and all times. Because this kind of shit is reprehensible. Because, of course, this is going to be blamed on Black Lives Matter as a political ideology, as a group. This is going to be blamed on all the protests. It's already being blamed. I've already seen this. Oh, the protesters shot and killed a girl. Again, that could be true, but we do not know that yet. But either way, that doesn't mean, people can be protesting for specific things and then not actually be the physical embodiment of what those protests are about. And my example is the Bernie Sanders campaign. I met a lot of people through the Bernie Sanders campaign that hate transgender people. That's a little weird. You'd think you're supporting a socialist who wants to have health care for all citizens and who wants to make all people equal. You'd think, if you're supporting them, you wouldn't hate transgender people. But there are a lot of people that call themselves socialists and that supported Bernie Sanders that hated transgender people and that still do. Okay? That does not mean that the Bernie movement, or in this sense, the Black Lives Matter protests, they're not accounting for every single action taken place. They're accounting for the overall message. And the overall message is clear, that Black Lives Matter, and there should not be any sort of distraction from that message. And that's the thing, is again, when you have limited organization, when you have a police force that says they don't care, when you've got all these different groups angry at each other, scared of each other, that's where nefarious actors thrive. That's where, in a lot of situations like with Chaz, that's why fascist militias would go in, causing trouble. Because there is a vacuum, and that vacuum does not need a state department like law enforcement. That vacuum just needs any sort of organizational capacity that brings people together and that can have them be disciplined and understanding of the message at hand. Because this is only going to make things a lot worse. All the violence at protests is always going to be blamed on protesters. So whether it be someone not affiliated with protesters killing protesters in Seattle, That's the protesters' fault. They shouldn't have been there. So, and then this situation this is the protesters' fault. They created the environment where an 8-year-old was shot. And then you have like all these other situations where, these are the It's never the law enforcement's fault. It's never the state's fault for not responding in fashion. It's never the government's fault for not giving people the resources that they need during a pandemic to sustain themselves and their family. It's never their fault. It's always the individual's fault. It's always the protests' fault. And that's what you need to understand, is that it's not. Individual actors will make bad decisions. And they can be attributed to a wider movement if there is the reason to attribute them, if there is those links. But not always are there links. And either way, this stuff is reprehensible and needs to be roundly dismissed. And, the idea that this is going to be something that makes protesting harder, because people are going to be like, protesters killed an 8-year-old. Even though that may not be true, that doesn't matter. Because the facts do not matter. You need to prevent these situations from occurring and then also minimize the damage that they can produce. And the best way to do that is via community organizing. And that's just what is lacking in almost all of our communities, because we're atomized. We're taught to be individualists. We're taught not to rely on other people. And that has serious problems. When everyone is afraid of one another, that's what causes these situations. If we just had a federal government that didn't want to kill us all, and that gave us all like what we needed throughout this pandemic to make sure that we didn't lose our jobs, to make sure that we had the money to live, to make sure that we weren't evicted, things would be fine right now. If we had a government that existed, that actually cared about black lives and minorities in general, and did police reform decades ago, we would not be in this situation. So yes, it can be that protests were used as a reason for people to get their rocks off and kill people. But that does not mean that the protests are invalid. That doesn't mean that decades and centuries of oppression is automatically okay, and you can't let your eye get off of the ball here. Thank you for watching. Y'all have a good one. If you see any updates, please let me know. Thank you.